Properties. Today we are joined with Christian Osgood. Christian left a sales career to amass a $24 million real estate portfolio, founding Kensho Property Management and Multifamily Strategy.com without bank loans or syndications. Christian, we're excited to have you on the show today, learn more about how you've done all this. If you could, let the listeners know a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, I'm a investor out of live in the Seattle area, but invest in Central Washington and a little bit in Texas, where I will eventually move to sometime next year. But started in real estate actually at the Costar group. I made the mistake of thinking that you had to get a job in real estate to qualify yourself to buy real estate. Common mistake, but the only way to be an investor is to actually buy the real estate. So figured that out around 2020, bought a duplex. Second duplex, ran into problem number two, which is it's really hard to scale to your goals with small buildings. Next deal I bought was a seller financed 38 plex with my business partner, Cody Davis. And over the last 2 years, we've amassed about 200 multifamily units, seller finance resort. We got multifamily strategy.com, our education platform, off the ground. And we have our my property management company, Kensho Property Management, which manages a little under 300 units today. So a lot of our portfolio and a little bit of third party.
Very cool. Very interesting. So seller finance, I know we hear a lot about that. There's Pace Morby out there that definitely pumps out the message as far as out there on social. And it's a great strategy. I mean, it gets you in a property. It keeps the sellers in the property where they can still get their return. Tell us, if you could, how that looks as far as like the initial conversation, and then how you get the sellers to actually buy into it.
Yeah, and you mentioned Pace, and Pace is the master, and I'll always talk highly of him. He is the master of working the distressed properties, and so his strategy, which is totally valid, does differ quite a bit from ours. The way that it looks, they're both creative, they're both finance, they're both legal, and there are some differences. The main thing that we have found has been effective for us is seller financing is going to be a relationship game. If you're using stuff like subject to, or you're going after single family houses, you're going to be looking for distressed stuff, which is where that whole team lies. On our strategy, we try to focus on the opposite end of the spectrum. I meet with masters of the game who've done exactly what I want to do, and I learn from them how they played the game. And this works in every market in the US. I found a lot of luck in smaller cities, but it works in sub-markets of larger markets as well. Essentially, I found just about everywhere there are 4 or 5 groups that, for the most part, control all the mid-sized multifamily. There's not a ton of people in any given market or sub-market that are all buying the same stuff. You have your duplex people, then you have your mid-sized multifamily people, and we are trying to meet with the people. Say your goal is to get to 100 multifamily units and $20,000 a month cash flow. If that's what you're trying to get to, I'm going to meet the 4 or 5 people in my market who have done exactly that. They own about 100 units or more, and they've already reached all my financial goals. And I meet with them instead of saying, hey, I would like to buy a building from you. I want to propose a transaction. It's, hey, here's where I'm at in my business right now and what I'm trying to do in 45 seconds. I'm admiring the business that you've built. I'm trying to figure out how to get from A to B. You've already done it. Can we grab coffee? And I want to learn how you played the game. And out of those relationships, they've either recommended me properties that they don't want to buy in this part of their business cycle that are perfect for me, or in some occasions, we've had meetings where they said, hey, you know what? I've watched the way you guys operate. I love what you're doing. You're doing exactly what I would do, because they're the ones who taught us how to do it. And we've had multiple conversations where people with hundreds of units have said, hey, I want to seller finance my whole portfolio to you guys over the next several years. Let's start writing the first few contracts. And we're several deals into multiple transactions like that. But that is the core of the strategy, and that is the most important thing. It is relationship-based, meeting with the people who have already done what you want to do and playing the game the way they played it. If you can do that, you build an incredible amount of trust, and opportunities appear.
Nice. How are you all getting your buy box, and then finding out which properties to hone in on that are still owner managed, and you feel like would be a good candidate for seller financing?
Yeah, so on the seller financing, there's only a few things that matter. I say this in every podcast and pretty much every YouTube video that I put out, which is you're going for long-term cash flowing fixed rate debt on multifamily properties in your market. So when I hone in on a market, I double and triple down on it. So the first market that we worked on is Grant County, Washington, specifically the city of Moses Lake. And since we've branched to the surrounding cities of Ephrata and Quincy. So for me, the main thing is, okay, let's figure out exactly what it is we want to do and let's go out and do it. The buy box is we want to own multifamily properties in this area and we want to absolutely dominate the multifamily. If I buy a building on Broadway, I want to own the rest of the multifamily on Broadway. Only way to do that is to know all the other players there. So when I buy a building, I immediately call all the neighbors and I say, hey, I want to introduce myself. My name's Christian. I just bought the building down the street from you. I want to get to know the other players in the market. Here's what I'm trying to build and would love to connect next time you guys are in town. And it usually takes a few weeks in any given market to really get that first meeting with all of the major players. Maybe one or two people will meet with you, but generally speaking, once you're in and you're another player, everyone else wants to know what's going on. So you go out, get coffee, and the buy box is it's multifamily that cash flows on long-term fixed rate cash flowing debt. That is the only thing that matters to me. When I close a deal, our income goes up. Fixed rate is everything, and I think we've seen a lot of that in this last market cycle where interest rates went from 3 to 8. Fixed rate, if you lock in a deal with cash flow, especially on creative terms where you got to negotiate your own terms, variables are what kill you in real estate. All the players I've interviewed who have lost real estate and had to rebuild, they had some variable in their portfolio. Could have been employees, could have been balloons, could have been variable interest. But you fix all the variables that you can. So long-term, fixed rate, cash flowing debt. Every time you buy a deal, your income goes up. It gets that much easier to buy the next one.
Yeah, no, you hit it on the head. There's a lot of pain right now for sure in the in different areas where interest rate is the variable, or even mezz debt's the variable. There's things are colliding and creating a lot of pain on the forefront. And
The variable
ultimately,
mezz debt was really hard too because that has 2 time bombs, right? You usually have shorter term and it's variable. So now you're stuck with a high interest debt that's hard to refinance out of with an incoming time bomb. I think that's where a lot of players are feeling the most pain right now, where the few groups that we've seen go all the way out.
yeah,
That was almost exclusively what happened is they
well,
were caught between projects.
yeah, your DSCR blows up because of the mezz debt, and you can't refinance the principal mortgage because of the mezz. So that it's just it's a house of cards on a property. It's
Yeah, and if you're doing creative finance where you negotiate your own debt, there's no excuse for that, right? You put yourself in that position with your own debt product, which is why that the interest rate and the term are so important when you're negotiating a deal.
Yeah, I mean, and it's finding I think it's getting comfortable with the conversation and then taking action and then finding someone that actually is willing to buy into it and then getting it done. I think once you've done your first one, you get your confidence built up, and now that's the only way you want to take down deals is seller finance. I think and it's a tax hedge for the sellers too. So there's a ton of benefits. Now on as far as depreciation, yeah, everything's still in the seller's name, so you wouldn't partake in any depreciation along those lines, right?
Nope, everything is in your name, so it is seller finance. They are acting as the bank. Title goes to you, the property goes to you. They have a loan against the property, so it is a note and deed of trust, exactly like you would buy anything through a bank.
Okay, and if they still have debt on the property, that's still in their name, but you still get the note deed of trust with the
I
seller.
have never. So there are some people online who we won't name who really push for like, hey, let's do things and keep it subject to the existing debt. I am a huge advocate for if you're going to buy a property, put the property and the debt in your name. Especially right now, we just did a research project with a whole bunch of title companies on the subject to clause, which then that goes in a land contract, which we totally use land contracts. It's another form of seller financing. However, you have a clause in there that allows you, for those who don't know, to buy subject to the existing debt. So they actually keep the debt in their name on the property. Right now in our current rate environment, because in the past they didn't want to call this, because why would you call a note that's at 5% when rates are at 3? 20% of subject to notes are being called within 60 days of placement right now. And I've done that research project in 3 states. I've interviewed a lot of title reps. That seems to be the number. 1 out of 5 create an instantly callable note. If the goal is to own and never lose real estate, losing 1 out of 5 of your deals, you'll have to restructure it as the way out of it, which is messy. And then you have excise tax on deeding it back to there's a whole bunch of messes with that. So when we are buying real estate, we are getting free and clear title that is in our name, and it has a loan that is also in our name.
Okay, so you're assuming the existing loan. Is that correct?
I have never had to do that. No, it has been either I'm buying a property that has already been paid off, or the down payment covers any existing debt that they have.
Okay. So the property's free and clear.
Yep. That is a condition of everything that I have purchased. We have done a little over 200 units, and a lot of these are 10, 12 plexes. So I mean, we've done a lot of transactions with a lot of people. And what we've found consistently in almost every market, especially in the mid-sized properties, the players who have played the longest, who I would call them winning the game, have a 4-part cycle. They lever to buy. They stabilize the portfolio. That's where they get it fully leased, near market rent, no deferred maintenance. They optimize the portfolio, which is where they make it look nice. Maybe they upgrade to stone countertops. If they had some extra land, maybe they build some more units. And then they pay off their debt in full. And that is in markets all over the country. People who've been playing the game for a long time. So we're talking they've owned for 30 to 50 years. They hit a point where they're like, you know what? Levering's cool. There's some tax benefits. I've built what I came out to build, and I'm ready to delever. That's not every seller finance transaction I've done, but a lot of them are people who've played the game a lot longer than I have. They've paid off their debt. And so that is just a simple, they are financing their equity. And that is what seller finance is you can finance anything that you own. Now you can do clauses to assume debt, which we haven't done, but that's fine. As long as the debt's in your name, I love it. But typically what we do is, say they owe, the first deal we ever did is a perfect example, 38 units. They owed about 200,000. The down payment was 15% down. So we paid off their existing debt. They walked with $100,000 in cash. We bought a 38 unit property for $2 million, 15% down, seller financed, 5% interest only. Actually, I think it's 4% interest only. We then got the value of that building over 2 years to 4.1 million and cashed out that loan and replaced it with the bank loan. And that was in month 11. So on a 5-year note, we replaced it with long-term 10-year bank debt. But that is a perfect example of they had debt, they just didn't have a lot. That is a perfect property where down payment, pay off their debt, put the new debt in your name. We own the building, and that is about cut and dry of a sale as you can possibly have.
Got it. Okay, that's interesting. And then say you're going into a new market, how do you stand up property management?
So on a new market, I run property management in Washington, and my advice to everyone who wants to get into property management is don't. Property management has a few problems. One, property management is ridiculously low margin. It makes sense for me because there was no other good managers in the market that I was in. We had an instance where our first property manager actually stole the security deposits and left the state. That was a bummer, to say the least. So that was our first experience in third-party management. We didn't particularly like that. I didn't like the bookkeeping of any of the other managers, so we started our own company to manage our own assets. I make the money by managing the asset that I own. Property management in itself, rough business, low margins, and has 2 fatal flaws. If you do really well, you increase the value of their building, and people generally sell at some point, and you may or may not keep the business. And if you do a terrible job, you get fired. So you only really keep business if you're a very mediocre property manager, which is also not something you should aspire to. So when I'm doing another market, I like to set up the contractors I like working with, and I like doing that personally because that is a moneymaker. If you have a good team, that is big. Once I get that set up, I try to offload that into third-party management every single time. If you can find a good manager in your market and you don't have to self-manage, I highly recommend moving into competent management with a property manager who owns real estate themselves, because they're going to look at the business a lot different than a service provider would.
Yeah, well, when you get into scattered sites, it's extremely difficult to find a third-party property manager that can do it. that makes sense for their business and the business of being the property. So it's we manage all of our own properties as well, and that's truly the only way to do it, because you force the performance. You can stay on top of things much. You've got a vested interest. You're going to make sure that expenses are squashed. There's no excess cash flow going out that shouldn't be going to the various expenses. You can push as hard as you need to push on raising rents, business plan, renovations, just on and on and on. The value creation is truly managing the property, and then do what you want from it. So say you've got properties scattered out. What does the property management look like? Do you all have crews that are maintenance techs that are managing different properties, just constantly up full time? Are you all virtual, on site? What does that look like?
Yeah, majority of the company is virtual. We put a lot of systems in the cloud because we had to. My primary business is in Grant County, Washington. That is a vast majority of the properties, which makes it really easy, and that is our central hub. I, however, live 3.5 hours away, as does a lot of the team that runs it. So the property management, as far as who manages the phones, who coordinates the contractors, that is all done on the other side of the mountains on my team over here. So it's me, my wife, our property management director, Hannah. And then I have a primary boots on ground person in market. And so you have a 4-person team, can run really comfortably run 300 properties because the rest of it is all done through contractors. So the maintenance team, I have 3 different contractors that we work with very affordably, but they're coordinated daily by my wife, Danny. She's fantastic at managing the contractors. All of those projects are managed in a CRM. We hold everyone to a specific budget. So we pay a small premium to do a do not exceed quote on everything. So my costs are fixed on every project, which I am more than happy to lock in prices and eliminate variables. And that's pretty much how we built the whole thing. Use Appfolio Property Management for that software. And then over in our next adventure was in Mason County. I run a resort out there that is managed. It has a contract with my management company where we manage the employees, but there's 9 on-site employees in the summer and 4 in the winter that work around the clock, keeping that whole hospitality arm of the business going in the same system, same hub. It's all in Appfolio, or a system called Lodgify for hospitality.
Yeah, that's a short-term rental platform, which is a great arm to do as well. The hospitality, is that the same deal? Seller finance?
Seller financed, $4.5 million acquisition. The seller carried $3.5 million at 4.5% on an 8-year note. I like 10-year notes, but 8 years that's a pretty good debt term. Especially at 4.5%. Cash flows quite well. Resort was built in 1934. It's historic. It's on 12.5 acres, 20 cabins with hot tubs. It did $720,000 last year, which is $120,000 more than its best year in the last 88 years. We did very well managing it. Our expenses were higher, but our income was astronomically higher, which I'm very, very proud of. But yeah, that was a perfect example of, I called them. In retrospect, I wouldn't have gotten into hospitality. I would have stuck with what we know. That being said, it was a good deal and it does make money. I wanted this adventure. It's the perfect Pacific Northwest thing. It is on the water, on the Hood Canal. So that's a saltwater canal that runs through the coast of Washington. The orcas will run through there occasionally. Salmon run up the stream that runs through the campus, and it's on the foothills of the Olympic Mountains. So when you talk about like picturesque resort, it is an awesome property. I called the owners and said, look, we've done, I think at the time we were a little over 100 units of multifamily. I've built systems, I've built teams, I've built a property management company. This is a direction that we want to go, and I have no experience in hospitality. You guys have done this. I saw that your property was for sale, but I really want to learn how you run this because I'm not capable of running something like this at this point. They actually moved Cody, my business partner, on site for a few months to train him up. And we did a 90-day feasibility in which we were there pretty much every other day learning the operations from them. So not only did they finance the deal, they taught us how to run hospitality so that was a smooth handoff where they knew they weren't going to have to take the property back. because we are going to run it well. And we have run it very, very well. We run our events out of it. We have expanded the wedding business dramatically. And we actually swapped recently from a primary focus of nightly stays to business events. And that has been more lucrative and easier to run. But yeah, that's perfect example of meet someone who's done what you want to do, learn how to do it. And that builds the trust where they're going to give you terms that they wouldn't give anyone else.
Yeah, and it's smart for them to do the training because, of course, they can and make sure that they're going to get paid every month too for servicing the note. Absolutely. Plus, they're there for a support call if and when they need to be there. That's good. Hospitality, the gross revenue is more. There's more. The expenses are more fragmented, which you've got less control on the expenses, but and the consistency. But it's like every industry, no matter what, has its BS that you have to deal with. There's no easy button on anything. If it's worth doing, then it's not going to be. It's just not easy.
Yeah, and what I have learned in the process is while it has been fun, I don't necessarily regret the deal. If I could go back in time, I think the right thing to do would not to divest from what I was focused on. I took too many team members and split their focus across multiple asset classes. We were too small to do the deal that we did. It worked. It makes money, but we could have, in that time, we could have bought another few hundred multifamily units and focused all of our attention on optimizing them. We would have made more money and had less headache. That was my my business lesson. When you have the creative finance thing down, you can buy anything with or without money.
Yeah.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And sometimes you see an opportunity and you're a young entrepreneur and you're like, oh my gosh, we're going to make all this money. And then you look back and you go like, did we really build the business that we wanted to build when we did that? And in this case, probably not. I think this would have been a better project to do 5 years into business, not one. But you live and you learn. So if anyone else can learn from that, if you have something that's working, optimize and focus on that and have new adventures later on in your career.
I think it's the adage, just keep the main thing the main thing. And that's where that kind of comes from. Because anybody who's went out there and the entrepreneur journey is everything's a shiny object. And it's hard not to say yes. I mean, you're technically supposed to be a yes man and create new problems. The hardest part is to focus on what the main thing is. That's the hardest discipline to have. But that's also where the gold is too. And a lot of people don't realize that the problem is truly not focusing in on exactly what you're already doing that is successful. That's where you see other people out there that are doing this, doing that. You're like, oh man, that looks like that's what I should be doing because they're perceived to be successful in exactly what they are doing. So now you shift your gear over and there it is. In real estate,
just because it makes money doesn't mean it makes sense, right? That's
it's economies of scale. It's economies of scale. Everyone can be successful if they spend enough time, long enough, doing the same exact thing over and over. It's just it takes time getting there. There's people that you see out there that are successful. You don't see the 10 years that they've spent building up to where they're at right now. It's versus just getting out there and starting it. So it's something that compounds year over year over year as your head gets bigger and you're able to digest different facets of the industry too. Real estate is extremely tempting on all of the asset classes because it's all, whether it's industrial, not office, of course, not right now, but multifamily is it's not disruptible. You can't disrupt. You cannot disrupt housing. It's impossible. The markets and the economies and their interest, there's disrupting elements, but the fact that people need somewhere to live, you can't disrupt that. That's
especially right now, because we saw like during the whole pandemic, or plandemic, depending on your leaning, the cost of construction went up astronomically, and it came down a bit, but I mean, it's way more expensive to build things than it was a few years ago. And on top of that, the cost of debt pretty much tripled, like 2.5x rapidly. It is really expensive and oftentimes not feasible to do new construction right now. So while we've seen interest rates go up, the reason we're seeing pricing continue to stay high and still continue to increase to some level in a lot of markets, you need housing, and there's still demand for housing, but we're not building enough because it's way too expensive. So I look at all of our indicators right now, and like you said, it's very hard to disrupt housing. Like maybe in an isolated area, but market wide, just on a grand scale, multifamily is going to win as a asset class.
Yeah, there's another webinar I was on the other night, and it's more of the affordable housing, the light tech communities is what the major shortage is finding those, turning the schoolhouses, the old retired schoolhouses into multifamily, the brand new institutional grade turned into light tech. Those programs are extremely huge barriers to entry. You have to almost be a lawyer to even understand the application process. But those are the communities that are on the shortfall. And it's tough to even compete. I mean, the when you're dealing with government programs, it's you've got to, and you're going into contract for 30 years for a light tech deal. It's if you get into the wrong program, you can get hosed. You can hose yourself and your partners along with you. But just keeping in things that are I say as big as your head, because you have to have the knowledge in your head to do things successfully. So it's constantly absorbing new information. Sometimes drinking out of a fire hose to kind of get ingested in there too. But
that's part of the adventure, right? Everyone kind of figures out their niche. Like we do a lot of entry level housing. So while we're not doing the LIHTC 30-year programs, we do a ton of Section 8. We've started doing hotel conversions recently, where you just take a totally failing hotel and you turn it into low income housing, and you can get great housing contracts for them. They're on year to year leases. There's a million ways to play the game, and that's one of my favorite things about multifamily. I haven't been in the game that long, but we've done a heck of a lot for our short time in business. While we're building these portfolios and learning stuff, I mean, I learned something new on every single project, every single plan, every single meeting with the city. There's so much nuance to the game. If you just stick with just general multifamily, you will never run out of fun projects and new adventures.
yeah, and you're helping reshape and enhance the community around you for sure. Especially if you're doing what responsible buyers do and responsible landlord operation companies do, and that's fix up the complex, fix up the community for the residents, that's kind of taking when it's been just neglected and getting it to where it's market rate is huge. The gratification is massive. It's delayed gratification, but it's the before, during, and after it's an incredible journey for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you spend all this time improving these communities, and that's exactly what we do. I mean, most of our stuff is pretty heavy value add, and I love doing it. It's fun to design, it's fun to operate, it's fun to execute, and it's very lucrative if you're good at it. When you're doing these projects, though, I don't know if you've run into this as much as I have, but I do not get a whole lot of love online for fixing up properties. People expect it
yeah,
free. They're mad. They tell you to get a real job.
it's your audience becomes different over time, and it's unfortunately it's just the way it is, because you're ultimately you're catering to a new audience, and you might have the same audience that kind of follows you and sees where you're going, but ultimately adversely affects them. But yeah, we've had some hate out there a little bit.
It's funny. It's specifically the communities that you spend the most time, money, and effort serving are the ones that hate you. I've found in this business, which is fine. You just should know that going in. Like that can't bother you. You do good things and you serve the communities, and everyone goes, "Oh, you're holding our properties for ransom." I'm like, well, when you shop at the grocery store, typically you pay them for the things that you need to live. That is usually how it works. Someone buys the service and delivers it to you, and then you take your package good and are grateful for it. But apparently we don't do that in housing anymore in the US. So it's
well, we've had projects where they were unlivable before we got in there, and it took them out of the slumlord situation on their flooring, cabinetry. I mean, everything's brand new, bringing these things online. So what's worse, before where you've got a community that's infested with drug dealing, and families can't function properly around all of that, or afterwards it's going to cost a little bit more to live there, but it's livable. It's a great place to raise a family, and at least a stepping stone to go to where you're ultimately heading. I mean, there's give and takes. It costs money to get it to that point, but ultimately it's a better community than what it was before. And that's what it
Absolutely.
should be. So
We bought a property that has the record in Grant County for most murders. Now, it used to be right outside of the city line, so there was issues with getting police there through the 80s. So majority is 80s, early 90s of the crime there. But when we took it over, 2 major drug problems. We have had 1 murder, but we brought it from a lot to very little. Since we bought the property over 2 years, we have gotten out all of the dangerous tenants. We've replaced everyone into our background checks and our screening. We have done about $1 million of renovation on 38 units. The police love us. They're like, you took the worst property, and it's actually a nice place to live, and it's super easy for them to manage now. There's a few more projects to do, but the projects are like, we would like to pave the gravel parking. Resided, new windows, new tenants, new roofs, no leaks. It had a chicken infestation. I'm not kidding. There's 3 tenants who were keeping chickens in their units.
yeah.
Breed in the courtyard. We cleaned up all the chickens. All of a sudden, you have this nice, sanitary, safe place. And it is so rewarding. But yeah, you won't get any love if you go into this business. You can make some money, you can do some good. Just don't expect to be appreciated at the same time.
Yeah. Now let me ask you, on a seller finance where you've got a heavy capex, where does that money come from?
So that's the nice thing with all your problems in business. How do you pay for them with money? Where's the money come from? Well, you have a few options. You can, excuse me, you can raise it on the front end, which is, in my opinion, the right way to do it. You do 2 sets of math. How are we going to cash flow day 1 on this property? And that's how we're going to write the note. And so in some properties, I've actually had, we do the down payment, and there's no payments for a period of time while we're getting the building stabilized. So there'll be 3 to 6 months, no payments, and then it'll start up. We've done other deals where we start at like 2% interest only, and we scale ourselves up to whatever their target was. Say they want to lend at 7%, and go, look at deal support's 2%, but we're not going to offer you, 2 is ridiculous. We get that. So year 1's going to be 2%. Year 2, it's going to be 4%. And then it's going to go to 6. Then it's going to go to 7. As we stabilize the property and the property supports the debt, you, as the prior owner, will get to partake in the success of the project. And if something goes wrong, you're going to take an asset back that is performing way better. Now, never lose the properties. Don't give them back. But that is a very easy sell to an owner. If you're like, look, no one's buying this. Here is a path to get you exactly what you want. It's a very easy proposal, very easy custom clause to just have escalating payments or a period of no payments. So when we're doing these, we write them where they cash flow day 1. That's the math. Then we go, okay, how long is the debt? And at the exit, conservatively, what do we expect the value to be? And I do the math, assuming that rents don't increase, which they always do. I'm just going to say, hey, we get rents to 90% of market, and cap rate's going to be at least 1 point higher on the valuation. That is where I do my math for, okay, we can raise capital. This is our actual budget to go renovate the property, because we're going to be able to refi conservatively at the end of this balloon and pull that money back out and pay any investors. So if you can raise it up front, best practice. Other option, you can buy a property that cash flows really well, and you can fix it up over time. We've done that on a few buildings. We bought them at a great price. We bought them with some cash flow. We had the down payment ourselves. We didn't want to bring partners, but we didn't have the money up front to fix up the property. Every month, as the rent checks come in, you reinvest into the property, and you do this over a few years. You can fix up a property slowly, as long as there's not anything major that needs to be addressed now. When you do that, just don't expect to pay yourself through the process. All the money goes back into the property. Your water heaters, even though they might be okay, they're going to start failing. They're going to get replaced. The cash flow is going to go back to the building. But we've done plenty where you just cash flow the renovations. Then the third option, which we've done several times, is you do increase the value. You work on the rents. You have some small budget to fix major problems right in the beginning. And then you do a quick refinance, take the money, reinvest in the building, and refinance again. And I've done multi-tiered refinances several times as well. There you go. We're going to get the value to X. We're going to pull out X amount of money, and then we're going to reinvest it in the property. And with the new value that we create, we'll do it again. That is an expensive way, especially with bank loans, because you're doing a whole bunch of fees. But if you don't have the money up front and you don't have the cash flow up front, sometimes you got to phase them out and you pull money multiple times. But the main thing is reinvest in the properties until they're stabilized, and then reinvest in them again until they're optimized. And if you end up with a whole portfolio of fully optimized properties, no deferred maintenance, they're beautiful. The tenant mix is fantastic. I mean, you're done. You know, that's how you win the game.
Yeah, and more importantly is to keep up with deferred maintenance. That's once they take off, once they start being neglected, that's where it turns into that's where you see the opportunities. I mean, ultimately, it comes from a burned out landlord who's just done it maybe too long on that property, and then the property goes into disarray, and then there lies the opportunity. So that's what we look for, at least, is the opportunities. I mean, you kind of have to value add if you're in that niche, but there's a lot of groups that are core A plus B that don't play in those sandboxes at all. So that's where we're at.
Yep. And listeners, this is why you have to scale. You don't want to be a burned out landlord at some point. You need to have enough systems, and it takes money and it takes some properties to fund a team that has systems. I started doing all this by scratch. I mean, we did a lot of our renovations ourselves when we started. I mean, I started from literally no money. So with $0, we bought a $2 million building that needed a ton of love. A lot of that was driving across the mountains in the snow and swinging a hammer, replacing a toilet, which I had no experience doing. Like, I started from zero. If you don't want to do that forever, because those are the properties that we end up buying that need a lot of love. The landlord has 1 or 2 buildings, and the buildings ate them alive as they got older. If you want systems, you want processes, you have to scale a portfolio that supports the staff and teams that you need to fix the buildings. Because we're at a point now where we have enough cash flowing real estate to where I can buy a property that breaks even day one, or a hotel conversion, which we love doing, where we can vacate the hotel and start putting leases in. The reason we can do it is because we can cash flow globally out of our portfolio while we do that. You get more projects and you get easier wins as you scale. And so for those who are newer or have a smaller portfolio, focus on building a business that doesn't just pay you what you want to be paid, but has enough excess to pay the staff to do the things that you don't want to do forever. You don't have to start there, but you need to build there.
Yeah, that's good. Very good advice for sure. Very good. Christian, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, learn more about yourself, everything you've put together, your experience, how can they reach out?
Best way, I have a channel, a YouTube channel, Cody and Christian Multifamily Strategy. We were starting videos on that before we bought any real estate. So I mean, that starts from actually zero. We've documented the entire journey. We do 3 to 4 videos a week and endless short form content. We have a lot of fun on that. So that's free. That's Cody and Christian Multifamily Strategy. If you have questions, hit me up on Instagram at Christian Osgood. I am extremely responsive there. That's the easiest way to message me.
Very cool. Awesome. Appreciate your time. Look forward to following you, and we will certainly talk soon. Thank you.